I said yes to a stranger's +1 invite because silence on Saturdays felt heavier than being brave for one night. I expected small talk, champagne, and escape. Instead, I met a man whose laugh steadied me, a note waiting on his door like a crossroads, and a ring tucked away like a quiet plan. Between first dances and long drives, we learned how to say yes to ordinary days, and to each other. This is how careful hearts become whole, together. If this moved you, please like, subscribe, and share. Comment your unexpected yes stories. We read and cherish everyone here. I found the invite in the library lobby, on the corkboard where the town posts everything from chess club announcements to piano lessons. I'd gone in to return a stack of cookbooks and walked out with a paper tab in my pocket and the part of me that says, "Why not?" Finally speaking over the part that prefers the couch. The flyer was simple, typed in a clean font and signed with a first name that felt like a hand offered. Family wedding next weekend. Need a +1. No expectations, just company. I'll drive, I'll pay for dinner, and I promise to be kind. Evan. At the bottom were tabs with his number and a smiley face drawn next to each one, which made me think he didn't know whether to hope or not. I stood by the drinking fountain longer than makes sense, reading and rereading the words. The library smelled like old paper and lemon floor cleaner, and outside you could hear the muted traffic that always makes me feel a little steadier, the hum of other people going about their days. My phone felt heavier than usual. My grandmother used to say, if a small choice makes your heart beat a tiny bit faster, it's probably worth making. She also said never peel hard-boiled eggs warm, or you'll lose half the egg white, and both tips have served me well. I took a tab. On the sidewalk, in the small patch of shade outside the front doors where the library has put a bench with a plaque that reads, "For anyone who needs a minute," I sent a text. "Hi, I'm Cal. I saw your +1 post at the library. I'm vaccinated, I'm punctual, and my favorite dance move is staying out of the way. If that sounds helpful, let me know." His reply came in 3 parts, the bubbles popping up, disappearing, then returning like surf. "Hi, Cal. I'm Evan. This is already my favorite text. Coffee tomorrow? We can check if we're each other's kind of safe. We picked a diner on Maple, where the booth cushions are cracked in a comforting way, and every waitress calls you sweetheart unless you look like a hon. I got there early, because I'm the sort of person who leaves the house with 15 extra minutes because the world sometimes needs them. He arrived right on time, walking quickly like someone who always worries they're late. He wore a button-down he'd ironed carefully except for one persistent crease, and when he smiled, it looked like the sun came through clouds in a way weather apps can never predict. "Cal?" he asked, with that hopeful upward lilt that made it sound like I could say any answer and he'd receive it gently. "That's me," I said, and then held out my hand. He shook it. Warm palm, gentle pressure, the kind of handshake that doesn't try to prove anything except presence. "I'm Evan," he said. "Thank you for not thinking this is too weird." "Oh, it's weird," I said. "But so is 2% milk and the way we turn on lamps when the sun is free." "I like weird that's honest." We slid into a booth. The waitress brought coffee without asking, and Evan reached for the creamer like a man negotiating a treaty with his daily life. We traded small truths, which is my favorite way to start. He teaches art to 6th graders, which means he has a high tolerance for glitter and a low tolerance for cruelty. He likes early mornings, late dinners, and the sound of trains at night. He saves instructions from appliances he no longer owns because you never know whose dishwasher manual might save a friendship. He has a younger sister, a nephew who only loves things with wheels, and a plant named Ruth that is, according to him, on the brink but stubborn. I told him I work in communications for a nonprofit that builds accessible playgrounds, so my emails use the words joy and compliance in the same sentence. I like stormy weather from inside the house and quiet stores on weekday mornings. I carry Band-Aids because once a stranger needed one and it made me believe we have chances to be useful if we're prepared. I live 4 blocks from the diner, and sometimes I walk past just to smell the pancakes and promise my future a good morning someday soon. He asked, "Do you believe in love at first sight?" Then held up his hands quickly. "Not this, I mean. Do you think some people just know?" "I believe in being ready," I said. Then when something good shows up, it looks like magic when it's really practice. He nodded like I'd just told him where a loose puzzle piece goes. We set ground rules like sensible people building a bridge. We'd go to the wedding together. We'd be kind no matter what. If either of us needed air, we'd step outside and the other would follow. We'd have a signal for when a conversation needed rescuing, touch the ear like a secret agent. We would not, under any circumstances, let any version of, "When are you two getting married?" make things awkward between us. We say our names clearly when we introduce each other, Evan said. We make sure people hear who you are, not just who you might be to me. That sentence was like a warm coat I didn't know I needed. At the end, he scribbled his address on a napkin out of habit like someone who keeps stationery close. I can pick you up, he said. But if you don't mind meeting at my place, we can avoid the logistics dance with the cousins. I'll be there, I said, and I meant it in more ways than one. Saturday came bright. The sky had that scrubbed look after a night of light rain, and the sidewalks were still damp enough to darken the concrete. I wore the suit I saved for fundraisers and graduations. I stopped at the bakery 2 doors down from his building and bought a box of gooey pecan bars, because I've learned if you bring something sweet, you are halfway to being understood. On the 3rd floor, I found his door right away, and right above the knob was a piece of paper taped neatly, the tape pressed down with careful thumbs. It wasn't my name on the paper, obviously. It was his. To Evan, written in a crisp, precise hand that didn't match his handwriting from the napkin. My eyes wanted to skim, but I didn't read. I know about letters that don't belong to me. I know about timing. I lifted my hand to knock and the door opened before I touched it. "Cal," he said, half relief, half surprise, all bright. His tie was a little off, his hair trying its best to obey. He looked like he'd tried to please an occasion, which is my favorite kind of handsome. "You have a note," I said, gesturing gently. He followed my gaze, and his mouth did a tiny downturn before he smoothed it back into neutral. "I see that," he said. He reached up, peeled it off, folded it once without opening it, and slid it into a small dish on his entry table that held keys and a bottle cap, the kind of dish that catches what you're not ready to hold. "I'll handle it later." We were quiet for a breath, respectful of the small weather system that had just moved through the doorway. Then he grinned. Are those pecan bars?" "They are," I said. "I also brought forks in case your family is civilized and doesn't just use fingers like raccoons." "My family is civilized raccoons," he said, and we laughed like people who have decided to be on the same team. He'd promised to drive, and he did, carefully, like someone who has learned the difference between making good time and having a good time. The wedding was at a riverside inn an hour north, with a gazebo that looked like every watercolor ever painted of a gazebo. We arrived early enough to walk the grounds, to stand by the water and say obvious things such as pretty, and mean them with our whole chests. He told me his cousin Sasha, the bride, had insisted he bring someone because she didn't want him to be peppered with questions by the aunt who still asks whether he's seeing any nice girls. He said it with affection and fatigue, a combo many families inspire. I've always found weddings a good place to learn people. You see their soft spots, their habits, the way they show up when asked to pay attention to love. Evan navigated with care. He said my name clearly when he introduced me. He didn't disappear. He asked me if I needed water. He let me stand with him at the back during the prelude and didn't make me joke to keep the quiet away. When Sasha walked down the aisle, his face lit up like someone relit a pilot light in his chest. He cried in a quiet, private way that made me want to tuck him into the part of my heart where I keep things that deserve the best view. At the reception, one of the uncles claimed us immediately. "I'm Howard," he said, gripping my hand like a handshake was a test he intended everyone to pass. "And who's this?" he asked Evan, winking like he'd tried to practice winking in a mirror and gave up halfway through. I stuck my hand out before Evan had to do the dance. "I'm Cal," I said steady. "I'm with Evan. I brought pecan bars." "You're a hero," Howard said, clapping my shoulder. "You can sit by me, unless you're lactose intolerant. Then you can sit across from me because I have a wedge of something that could take a man down." We laughed. The laughter came easy. That's not nothing. Dinner included stories about people I didn't know, and I learned how to listen generously. Evan leaned in to whisper translations. "That's Aunt Denise," he said at one point, gesturing with his eyes, "who has opinions about proper pie crust." Aunt Denise turned to me as if summoned and asked my opinion on shortening versus butter. I said truthfully, "I have a grandmother who would haunt me if I said anything but butter." Aunt Denise sized me up and nodded. "Smart," she said, and then insisted I take home a pie server. "For your future," she said. I tucked it into my bag like a promise I didn't want to break. When the dancing started, Evan gave me a look. "I will try," he said. "Just don't look at my feet. I will look at your face," I said. "It's the better view." We found a corner of the floor that felt safe. He was as he advertised, enthusiastic. He also had that rare quality of making whomever he danced with feel like they were the point, not the audience. During a slow song, his hand fit in mine like it had been taking measurements for weeks. He leaned in lightly, cheek near my temple, and I felt something inside me that had been braced loosen a bit, like a door hinge that finally accepted oil. On the way back, the car was full of the good silence. The kind where the radio can stay low and the turn signal can click a companionable metronome. When we pulled onto his block, the streetlights made soft halos on the pavement, and the building's windows glowed like small aquariums, each holding a version of home. "Would you come in for tea?" he asked. "Or water? Or sitting still?" "I can do sitting still," I said, and we walked up the stairs together. The note he'd tucked into the dish was waiting, uninvited but not ignoring us. He glanced at it. Then he looked at me. "Do you mind if I say this out loud?" he asked. "You can be here and not be responsible for it." "I'm listening," I said. "It's from an old chapter," he said, not touching the paper. "I can tell by the handwriting. Grant. We were together for a long time." He had a way of making big promises when the air was warm and forgetting them when it got cold. When his father got sick, he moved back home. He stopped calling and asked me to understand. I tried. I'm good at trying. We didn't say an ending. It just stopped. I kept the last thing he wrote to me too long. Sometimes I practice being braver than my old self. He took the note, turned it once, and set it back down. "I will read this," he said, "when I'm ready to read it for what it is, not what I wish it were." "I respect that," I said. Timing is a kindness. In his small kitchen, we made tea like a ceremony. He uses a kettle that whistles aggressively, a pot someone's grandmother probably gave him, and mugs that clink with a sound I love. We sat at a table by the window where the view is a brick wall that still manages to change with the light. He told me how he came out in college on a Tuesday to a friend who said, "I know," in the kindest voice, and how he cried in a bathroom stall after because he'd held his breath for years. I told him how I once went to a movie alone on a Friday, not because I wanted to, but because I wanted to teach myself that I could, and how I bought myself Junior Mints and cried when the lights went down, because sometimes confidence looks like a small box of candy. We said goodnight in the hallway like two people who finally found a frequency that makes sense. He didn't invite me to stay. I didn't step in farther. We didn't pretend we weren't thinking about the note. We just let the night be what it was, a start that felt somehow already middle-ish. The days that followed were not cinematic. They were better, simple and steady. He texted me photos of paint on his knuckles and the world's most chaotic macaroni sculpture with the caption, "This is a dinosaur. I'm told." I sent him a voice memo from my desk of the office dog snoring like a lawnmower. He left a bag of clementines outside my door when I told him I'd been too busy to get groceries. I taped a thank you note next to my doorbell because some gratitude deserves decoration. We went to the farmer's market on a Saturday that smelled like basil and new peaches. He bought honey from a woman who calls everyone love and insists on a taste test. I bought dahlias that looked like fireworks that found manners. We walked home slowly because we were carrying delicate things. On his stoop, he asked if I wanted to stay for lunch. "I make a mean grilled cheese," he said. Mean in the sense that it will pick you up and put you back down better. It did. We ate sandwiches too hot for our mouths, and he told me about his students and their enormous faith in glitter. I told him about switching out a slide at a playground to make it accessible within hours, and how at the ribbon cutting, a kid's joy made everyone clap even though no one had asked them to. 3 weeks in, late evening, the city braced for a storm. We watched the clouds gather and the light go gray and truthful. He sat on the couch with a blanket thrown at an angle that made him look like a picture in a magazine about comfort. The note from the door, still unopened, had migrated to the bookshelf, stuck between a field guide to birds and a collection of letters from a poet who knew something about loving people who don't always love themselves back. "Do you ever feel loyal to your old pain?" he asked. "Like it taught you so much you're afraid to put it down." "Yes," I said. "But I'm trying to become loyal to my current joy. It's quieter, but it pays better." He smiled at that. He got up, took the note down, and held it for a breath. Then he set it on the counter again. "I'll open you in the morning," he said to it not unkindly. When the day is fresh and I have coffee, we built a rhythm. Tuesdays, tea at my place with a cookie we'd pretend was for sharing. Thursdays, a walk by the river where we wave at the same old dog and its owner who always says, "She's friendlier than she looks," as if someone asked. Sundays, we cooked something ambitious and ended up laughing, flour on our faces, ordering pizza, because even the best intentions sometimes bow to a long week. I met his nephew, who made us identify trucks on a busy street until the light changed. "Dump," he'd say. "No cement." "No, bus." We agreed with everything because he was 2.5 and deserved to be right. Evan watched me watch his family like he was measuring how our edges might line up. One evening in August, warm and still, I came over and found a small box on his table. It wasn't hidden, not displayed either, just there, open, with a ring inside. Simple gold, worn a little, the kind of thing that looks best holding a story. My chest did that curious flip that is not panic, but the cousin of it. "He saw me see it." He smiled. Soft. "Before your brain runs away," he said, reaching out to touch my wrist like a landing strip. "It's not a surprise proposal. Not even a medium one. My mom gave it to me this weekend. It was my grandfather's. She said she wanted it out of a drawer and into a life that could use a reminder of stubborn love. She told me to put it somewhere I'd see it and think about the men I come from and the man I'm choosing to be. So I set it there." I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding hostage. "Rings do carry weather," I said. "Even just sitting," I leaned in to look. "It's beautiful." He didn't pick it up. He just looked at it too. "I want to be honest," he said. "I'm thinking about futures in a way that doesn't scare me. But I don't want to rush us. I want to do right by what's real." "Me too," I said, and it wasn't performative. It was steady. Around the same time, my father started taping notes to my door. My parents live 15 minutes away in a house that somehow smells like laundry and tomato sauce even when no one is cooked, and my father is of a generation that believes paper makes things more official. The first note invited me to breakfast at the diner where he orders oatmeal and then eats my bacon. The second said he found a box of my baseball cards and did I want to look before he gave them to the neighbor kid. The third, the one that got me in the throat, said simply, "I miss you. I'd like to listen better. Can you help me do that?" The pen had pressed hard enough to emboss the page. I called Evan before my yes. "He wants oatmeal and repentance," I said. "Do you want company?" he asked. "I can sit at the counter, read the paper, and pretend not to eavesdrop." "I think I should do this alone first," I said. "But can I come over after?" "In case I need a walk. You can come over before," he said, "and after. And in the middle if you need to sneak away and look at a big jar of pickles to think." Breakfast was careful. My father's voice is the kind that frays when he's saying anything that matters. He asked about Evan and whether I am happy, and whether happiness is the only metric we should be using for a life. I said I am learning that satisfaction and joy and responsibility can all hold hands. He nodded like I had said something both too modern and perfectly understandable. When the check came, he put his hand over it like a small act of defense against time, and I let him. After, Evan and I walked the loop around the reservoir because water helps. He didn't ask me to report. He just walked next to me and matched my pace and told me a story about a student who tried to paint the sky with a glue stick and then got mad at the sky for not participating. By the time we reached the bench near the far side, my shoulders had decided not to live around my ears anymore. Sometimes gentleness is as practical as a jacket in shade. We had our first real argument in late September. It was about something ordinary, who had time for what, dishes stacked just so, a plan made half out loud. He was tired from teaching. I was frustrated by a grant application that kept moving the goalposts. He said he didn't mind if we pushed dinner. I said I wished he had told me that 2 hours earlier. We both used our good words with the wrong tone. He left for a walk. I cleaned the kitchen a little too vigorously, as if the counter had personally offended me. When he came back, a light rain had dampened his hair and his edges. We sat at the table like people who didn't want to waste time pretending not to be sorry. "I'm sorry," he said first. "I don't like making you guess how I am." "I'm sorry," I said. "I don't like making small things into big feelings. I want us to be brave enough to name what we need before we're hungry." We made a plan. A practical one. Text the truth when plans change. Say, "I need 15 minutes" instead of "I'm fine," because fine can mean 10 different things, and none of them are helpful. We clinked our tea mugs and called it a truce. Then we ate buttered noodles with too much pepper, a simple feast that tastes like forgiving yourself. Autumn gave us crisp air and sweaters and a new kind of light. He took me to his school's fall carnival, and I watched him run the face-painting booth with a patience that belongs in a museum. We made pumpkin shapes that vaguely resembled pumpkins and stars that looked like they had opinions. One kid asked whether we were brothers, and before I could flounder, Evan said, "We're friends," with a glance at me that included a promise to let me supply the next word when I was ready. On the ride home, I rested my head against the window and felt grateful for the kind of care that doesn't need to win the dictionary. In November, his mom called to say his dad had asked, twice in one morning, whether it was Tuesday or Thursday. Evan sat on my couch and folded and unfolded the edge of his sleeve. "He taught me how to parallel park," he said, voice small. "He used to count the seconds between lightning and thunder with me like the sky was whispering secrets. I want to be nearer, not across the country, just nearer." We drove up that weekend to have dinner at his parents' house, which is painted a gentle yellow and smells like pancakes even at 6 in the evening. His mother is a woman who doesn't pretend a house must be perfect to be a welcome. His father told me a joke about a fisherman and then forgot the punchline and laughed anyway. We sat at the kitchen table and ate roast chicken and green beans and the kind of mashed potatoes that make you wonder whether you could propose to a starch. When we left, his mother hugged me long enough to rearrange something in my chest. "Thank you for loving my boy," she said softly, and I said the truest thing I could. He makes it easy. On the drive back, the car was quiet, except for the heater and the occasional wow that falls out of your mouth when you see a particularly straightforward moon. He reached into his jacket pocket, and the reflex in me that had learned to brace for the big ask tensed, then laughed at itself when he pulled out a lip balm. "I thought you thought I was—" "Yeah," he said, and we both smiled because our brains love to rehearse the important scenes even when we haven't written them yet. December arrived like someone turned the city's brightness dial up 2 clicks. We went to the tree lighting and watched people sing off-key with genuine hearts. He cried during "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas" in the exact way that makes you feel like the song did its job. I held his gloved hand and watched the lights flicker on, an ordinary magic that never gets old. A week before the holiday, I came over to his place and found the small box gone from the table. The ring's absence was not quiet. He saw me glance. "It's safe," he said, answering the question I hadn't asked out loud. I put it somewhere I wouldn't keep walking past it and thinking of the future like it was knocking. I want the present to have the best chair. That same night, he said he'd been thinking about moving closer to his parents. "Not right away," he said. "But soon, maybe. I want to be the son I want to be, and I want to be the partner I hope to be. I don't want to make you choose between me and your life here. I also don't want to not say this because I'm afraid of losing something." I thought of all the ways people had asked me to be brave before I knew what bravery cost. This didn't feel like that. It felt like being trusted with a map and a say. "Thank you for telling me," I said, and meant thank you for not deciding I couldn't handle it, and thank you for putting me in the room where this decision lives. We spent the next few weeks paying attention instead of predicting. We drove to the town he was considering, small, with a hardware store that still cuts keys while you wait, and a library with afternoon sunlight that makes the dust look like snow. The rental we liked had a porch that invited rocking chairs and an oven that was older than both of us but willing. People waved at stop signs because kindness isn't a city mouse or a country mouse. It's a habit. New Year's Eve, we didn't go out. We made soup and watched old movies and kissed at midnight like two people who know they're not responsible for making it the single most important kiss in history. He fell asleep with his head on my shoulder. I counted his breaths and decided this was better than fireworks. January and February were quiet, not empty. He started reading aloud to me sometimes, from books his students loved, from poems he found in the library's free bin, from notes he'd scribbled when a thought came at a red light. I started leaving him notes under his doormat when he had a hard day. "Your patience is a bridge people cross safely." He'd reply with a post-it on my lunch container. "Eat this. You are loved." Also, there's a brownie in the bottom drawer. Do not tell your coworkers. In early March, on a Wednesday that felt like it didn't think it was special, I found an envelope on my own door. The handwriting was familiar, his. I smiled before I opened it. Inside, neat lines. "Tonight, come by after work. I made something terrible and need you to be brave about it. Also, I've been practicing a question and I want to ask it in a room that's seen us laugh." My heart did its happy thrum. I changed my shirt, brushed my teeth, put on the good socks that don't announce themselves but make you stand taller, and walked over. He had lit a candle that smelled like oranges because he's the kind of person who thinks about scent as a part of comfort. The kitchen looked like a cooking show had been filmed there, and then the host quit. He stirred something, grimaced, and we both laughed. He set 2 bowls in front of me. "Taste and tell the truth," he said. We did. It wasn't great. We ordered Thai and ate it out of containers like we were college kids again, except this time the conversation was better and the chopsticks didn't splinter. After dinner, he wiped his palms on a towel, reached into his pocket, and pulled out the ring. It looked like it always did. Simple, honest, full of family. He held it like you hold a baby bird, careful, not scared. "I'm not asking a question I haven't earned," he said. "But I do want to ask one. Will you build a life with me? We can do it slow. We can do it with care. We can do it here or nearer to my folks if we choose that together. I want to be the man I am when you look at me. I want to be the man who looks at you like you just found the thing he'd lost." There are moments where words get shy. I laughed a little because my body needed to let air out. Then I cried, not like a dam, but like a good rain after a dusty month. "Yes," I said. "Not because I'm surprised, but because this is the truest answer I have." He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit like a decision that had taken its time. We told our families in the way that made sense for each. My sister screamed into the phone and then apologized to her cat. His mother cried and then started listing recipes we'd need to learn. His father told the joke about the fisherman again, and this time remembered the end. We didn't post about it right away, not because we were hiding, but because we wanted a small pocket of quiet to savor. He put the box the ring had come in on his bookshelf next to a photo of his grandparents at Coney Island, both of them squinting into a future that had no idea we'd be here, borrowing their light. We planned a wedding like we were planning a community event, because that's what it was, our community, our event. We chose a community garden behind a church with a sign out front that says simply, "You are loved," and nobody argued. Friends brought folding chairs and deviled eggs. The neighbor kid drew a big chalk heart on the sidewalk and then guarded it fiercely with a plastic sword. Aunt Denise showed up with a stack of quilts in case the wind thinks it's invited. We put a small basket by the entrance with index cards and pens and asked people to write us advice they had actually tried. Our vows were short and sincere, the way I think promises should be. We said we would share the blanket even when one of us hogs it. We said we would tell the truth kindly. We said we would not keep score like a sport we didn't sign up to play. We said we would take turns being the brave one. We said we would ask for help without making it a confession. We said we would write notes when words felt heavy and tape them up where the other could find them without the pressure of eye contact. We said we would turn toward each other when the house was loud, and toward the world when the world was loud, and toward the dog we hoped to have someday when it barked for no reason. Everything that could have gone imperfect did a little. The wind knocked over one of the ferns. A bee wanted to be in every photo. Halfway through the ring exchange, the neighbor kid with the plastic sword yelled, "Snack time!" and half our guests cheered. It was perfect, if you ask me, because perfection doesn't have nearly as many good stories attached. That night, when the last dish was washed and our feet were tired and our hearts were wide open, We stood in the kitchen and listened to the kettle learn how to sing. He leaned his forehead against mine. "We did that," he said, like a child who has just ridden a bike farther than the driveway. "We did," I said, and let the calm settle like a blanket. Life after the party didn't suddenly become cinematic. It became ours in a deeper way. He took a job at a school 20 minutes from his parents, and we found a house halfway between with a screened porch and a yard that had opinions about weeds. We painted the bedroom a color called soft morning, which is a little on the nose, but which makes every dawn feel like we made a good decision. We learned the new grocery store's floor plan and the best route to avoid the afternoon sun on the highway. We kept going back to the old diner when we visited because places that show you kindness deserve your loyalty. We made new habits. On Mondays, when the week felt hard before it had even started, we put a note near the front door reminding us who we are. "Gentle is not weak," one said. "You can say no, and we will still love you," said another. When one of us had a rough day, the other would put a glass of water into the other's hand and say, "Step 1, which was code for, before we fix anything, we hydrate. He opened the note from Grant on a Saturday morning that smelled like coffee and toast. He read it twice. It wasn't a bomb. It was a letter written by a person who was very much a person, confused, apologetic, a little vain, trying. It asked for forgiveness without asking to return. Evan cried for a minute the way you cry when a younger version of yourself needs a hug and you finally give it. He wrote a reply that told the truth but didn't hold a grudge. He put both in a folder and then made pancakes like the act of feeding a morning can be medicine. We had more arguments because that's how two separate people wind up sharing a life. We argued about whether a towel can be used more than once, it can, and whether the spoons go face up or face down in the dishwasher, face down, but it depends on the spoons, and about the amount of time you can say, "I'm almost ready," before it stops being cute. We apologized. We learned which fights were really about something else and named the something else. We took walks after dark when the street was quiet and said we were sorry in between, nodding at neighbors who couldn't tell. We made up before bed not because we believe anger becomes poison at midnight, but because we sleep better with unknotted hearts. We learned about each other's bodies like librarians, respectful, attentive, well-practiced in honoring what each page needs. We held hands in grocery aisles, traded the good mug back and forth without keeping score, and learned to ask for space without making it sting. We told each other the dumbest jokes we knew and laughed anyway. He bought us matching slippers not because a catalog told him to, but because he wanted our feet to be prioritized. When his father's memory had more off days than on, we adjusted the plan. We spent Tuesdays doing the crossword puzzle together, even when all three of us were wrong about 17 down and didn't care. We went to doctor's appointments and wrote down questions in a notebook decorated with strawberries because that's the one his mother liked. We met the dog trainer in the park and decided now was not the time for a puppy because loving is not always adding. Sometimes it's making room for what's here. I stood with him at his father's side on a day that was hard and watched him be the exact son he said he wanted to be, patient, gentle, present. Later, we sat in the car in the driveway and ate peanut butter crackers like champions, and he leaned his head on the steering wheel and cried in that quiet way, and I put my hand on his back and said nothing, because sometimes nothing is the right thing. We also had 1,000 ordinary joys. We grew tomatoes that tasted like sunshine remembered. We learned to make soup without a recipe and felt rich. We sang along to the radio and made up harmonies we had no business making. On Sundays, we put on old records and waltzed in socks on the kitchen tile, clumsy and delighted. On spring mornings, we drank coffee on the porch and waved to joggers like retirees. And one day, a jogger waved back and yelled, "You two are the best part of this route." And we took that compliment and put it on the top shelf of our memory where the fancy glasses are. One afternoon, a sudden summer storm rolled in. The power flickered and then surrendered. We lit candles we would never have lit otherwise. The house went quiet in a way that felt like an invitation. We played cards and told each other the very first thing we remembered about being little. He remembered a sandbox with a yellow bucket that always got stuck. I remembered my mother braiding my hair too tight and then loosening it while singing along to the radio. We were older versions of old stories, and somehow that made the stories easier to carry, years unspooled. We taped notes near the door when one of us left early, so the other would wake up to a thought. You are more than your to-do list. He slipped love notes into my coat pockets, the kind that make a dentist appointment feel like a party. We tried new foods, new routes, new ways of getting out of a funk. We made friends with neighbors who keep their porch light on until midnight and with the barista who writes our names with too many loops. Every season, we re-chose. That's the truth I wish I'd learned earlier. You don't say yes once and then coast. You say yes to making soup when you're both tired. You say yes to forgiving the dishwasher mistake. You say yes to driving across town to the good park because old swings swing best. You say yes to staying at the table for 5 minutes more, even when the dishes tug at you. You say yes to telling the truth kindly when the truth is a little sharp. You say yes to the invitation that showed up on a dusty bulletin board, and to the laugh that made your shoulders drop, and to the ring that sat quietly until the day it made noise. People ask me how we knew. The honest answer is that we didn't get one big trumpet. We got 100 small confirmations. He said my name clearly when it would have been easier to let me be generic. He made space for my family without making it weird. He told me when he was scared. He let me hold his fear without trying to tidy it. He danced like nobody was watching and also like he knew I was and wanted me to have fun. He saved the last bite for me, and when I told him I didn't want it, he saved it in the fridge and knew I'd change my mind. He taped a note to his door when he needed to give words a landing pad. He slipped a ring into his pocket the day he decided to ask the question we'd already been living. We still go to the library. We still stop at the corkboard on our way out and read about other people's band concerts and babysitting services and bake sales. Sometimes he squeezes my hand and murmurs, "Imagine if you hadn't." And I sometimes say, "Imagine if you hadn't." And we both let the gratitude blow our hair back a little. Because that's what this is, in the end. A series of small, brave choices made by two people who decided to bet on kindness. Some nights, when the world feels loud, we turn it down. We turn on the lamp with the soft shade and put the kettle on and pull out the blanket with the fringe. We slow dance badly to something we both know by heart. And in between the clumsy steps, we tell each other things like, "Thank you for today," and "I liked how you laughed at lunch," and "I'm glad you exist." And then we go to sleep with our hands not quite touching. Because sometimes a little space is the most loving thing. And sometimes we fall asleep in a tangle that would make a spreadsheet cry. Because sometimes that's right too. If you're waiting for a sign, I can't give it to you. But I can tell you this. I said yes to a small request that felt a little like jumping in a pool while the sun was out and the water was cold. And before I knew it, I was swimming with someone who knew how to make the water feel like air. I took his +1 invite. I fell for him, because falling turned out to be the same as standing next to the person making tea while the rain taught the roof a new song. And I stayed because saying yes to the ordinary with him taught me that ordinary isn't ordinary at all. It's miraculous quietly if you let it be.